Hello everyone! So today I want to talk about Lethal Company. I've been playing the game again recently. I used to play it a while before. I have around 300 hours in the game. Not an amazing player by any means, but definitely more into the game than most people. And I just want to talk about some changes that I personally think could benefit the game. These are going to be 5 balance ideas and 5 quality of life things that will speedrun at the end. I have some solo gameplay in the background, and let's just get started. So I don't really have an order for these, but the first thing I want to talk about is guns and nutcrackers. So I think that guns being an endgame item that you could unlock by killing a difficult enemy with a shovel and all that is totally fine. However, I think that guns are a little bit overtuned, mainly that I think it's very easy to just keep using it and constantly being able to get another one more easily. Like getting the first gun could be very difficult, but once you have one, nutcrackers become a very easy enemy to take care of, and I don't really like that kind of balance. I feel like it's very easy to start acquiring a very large amount of guns and ammo, and I'm not saying this needs to have a major change because I think the guns are quite fun, and I like the nutcracker fights quite a bit. I think it made Rend one of the best viewer experience moons when I was watching high quota runs. However, I think there's one small change you could do that would balance the economy a little bit and make the matchup a little bit more interesting, even if still kind of easy for gun versus nutcracker. And that's, I think nutcrackers should be like butlers, where they're able to tank 2 hits from the gun instead of 1. And that way, even if you are fighting the nutcracker with a gun, you'll still get like more out of it because you'll get the spare gun and it always drops the ammo, so you'll always get 1 or 2 shots even if you have to use 2 shots to kill it. But there's a little bit more benefit to killing it with a different weapon, and I think it just makes it so that you're not getting too many guns and it just balances it a little bit more, and there's just a bit more of a chance that you can get shot back by the nutcracker, so I think that would just make it a little bit more interesting. So small thing to start. Number 2, another smaller one. Mineshaft. I don't really like how Mineshaft has been balanced. The way that Zeekerss went around it is just making it that there's 6 more items in Mineshaft than there are in the other interiors. And I'm just not a big fan of that solution. I think that Mineshaft is very interesting since it's more difficult and it's a bit more complex with the 2 different kinds of interiors, which is really neat. But I think the thing that ruins it is mostly just the navigation time. Between the extra time taken by having to use the elevator and the extra time needed to find the mines themselves is what ends up making Mineshaft feel kind of miserable for me. It's very RNG dependent, especially if fire and main happen to generate on the same side of the mines. It's particularly annoying. I just think the solution to this would be to have Mineshaft have a slightly smaller map size instead, and that would mainly cut down on the size of the facility portion. I think the facility should be a little bit smaller, and then you wouldn't have to do the extra 6 items, because I think it's also just the least fun part to navigate to where the mines are, and I don't mind there being a little bit of pathing through the facility, but on some of the larger moons, it's just a little bit annoying if you're playing Mineshaft on like Titan or Artifice. I think it's just not as enjoyable. There is another problem with Mineshaft, which is the underwater section, which this might be the least controversial thing I'm going to say in this video, because I think most people hate the underwater section. You can just get stuck sometimes. It feels really janky, and I wish it would be tweaked a little bit. So, next up is tier 3 to 4 moon balancing. So, I think what Artifice was added, the original idea, if you were going for higher quotas, is that you would originally oversell for a tier 3 moon, play tier 3 moons a little bit, and then go to Artifice later. I think that's also partially the reason Artifice was nerfed down, to try to make that more appealing, but it didn't really work. And so, in my opinion, I would like to see some more balancing done from this, and there's 2 things I want to see. The main one that would be needed is I think Artifice should be more expensive. Artifice is currently 1,500, which might sound like a lot, but it's not really that difficult to oversell for it on your first quota and also get like Cruiser. You could even do it in Jetpack if it was good. Like that's still feasible to get from Adamance 3 times if you like do good enough with it. So I think Artifice should be around 2,000 because I think that you should have to do tier 3 moon in the beginning. It would be cool to just have a little bit of progression, even if it's 1 quota on a tier 3 moon. But I think a little more important than making Artifice more expensive would be that I think the tier 3 moons should all be buffed a little bit. I'd like to see around 2 to 3 more scrap added to pretty much all of them, maybe even a little more on Titan. But I'd like to see some more creative changes as well. I think Titan is long overdue for a second fire exit with how large the map is. You could put it on the left side. I'm not really sure what you can do with Dyne because I never really play it because it's bad. And then Rend, I think, is probably the most fun moon to play on still, but maybe add like a light or two by the fire exit path back to the ship. Or if you don't want to do that path, if you really want to keep that difficult, have like a little bit more lights to route the long way back to the main entrance. I just think that it's a little bit difficult, and this is someone who has routed Rend all the way back on like nighttime 10 p.m. eclipse. I just think it's still a little bit absurd, but ideally, I think you could make the tier 3 moons have a little bit more loot, and it would still be feasible to get it all, and then have art be a little bit more expensive. And that would just be a good way to balance it. Same for if they add other moons, like if Liquidation finally happens as a tier 4 moon, I think they should all be at least 2,000. So I think that would make them much more of an endgame moon, and then you would still have to spend a quota or two on the tier 3 moons. It sounds like a small thing, but I think that little bit of added progression would be really nice. So fourth up, this is the largest thing for multiplayer I want to talk about, and this might also be where I get some people disagreeing with me, so I'm open to hearing any opinions, especially from players who also play the game a lot and, you know, might have more experience with this. I don't like the cruiser jump on Artifice. I think that Jetpack was a pretty good balance of being very powerful without ruining the outdoor game, because you could jetpack items, but it would still be multiple trips, it would still be very risky, and it wouldn't be all your items. You'd still have to run back two-handed, which made running back items outdoors less annoying, less slow, but still there. There's a lot of moments that I personally really remember from watching the game more that revolve around dealing with the outdoor enemies. For example, there's a version 49 run where they try to bring a cash register back at like 10 p.m. on one of Bread's runs. I don't know the clip exactly, but it was like 2 people running the cash back in the middle of the night, and that was just really entertaining for me. But now the outdoors is basically non-existent because you just put everything on the cruiser, and the cruiser is rarely ever in danger. So the most you need to do is like maybe route whatever enemy spawns over there, and then the cruiser jump is still cool and all, but like that's it. It's just everything goes from the cruiser to the ship in one attempt. And I think it just breaks the game a little too much. I have no idea how you would balance it, honestly. I legitimately have no idea how to fix it. But for me, it just... I wouldn't say it ruins watching runs for me. They're still very entertaining for late game version runs, but I just think that it's less interesting. There's a bit less dynamic stuff going on. And it also does make it so that there's less time pressure for looting, since obviously you don't have to worry about bringing things back to the ship late in the day. So I'd like to see something about that changed, but I don't know if there's a solution for that realistically. So the fifth balancing change is a little bit different than all of this. I've kind of been talking about the base game here and the main things I have with that, and I could talk about smaller things like offense obviously is a terrible moon right now, or making knife a little bit better. But the only real more important thing I want to talk about is I think that the solo experience needs a little bit of tweaks. I can enjoy the solo queue experience where the one death ends the game and like it's just that tough you can lose all of your scrap. But I think there should be some option for a solo mode where dying doesn't ruin everything. I think a really good compromise would be that since the company has to revive you or in some way to keep your scrap on the ship, that if you die on that day, you not only lose all your quota for that day, but you also have some penalty, some fee you owe the company. Like it could be a few hundred scrap or something. And that would be a good way to make death still really punishing without ending the run. I think for most people that would make solo a more accessible mode. It should definitely be optional, not a default thing, but I would like to see it. Anyway, with those out of the way, I just want to give some 5 quality of life things that I've noticed. These aren't really major points by any means, and they don't really hamper my experience too much, but there's just some small things that I'd really like to see tweaked that I feel like aren't too difficult to do. First off, I really would like selling to be faster. Once you hit like 2,000 or higher quotas, selling is annoyingly slow at the end of the day, and I really think there needs to be some adjustment. Maybe just make it so as the quotas get higher, the counter can fit more loot, so it's like proportional or something. But it's just really annoying to have to sell for so long. And then watching high quota is even worse when they have like a 5-digit quota and you're watching a stream and you just have to wait like 5-10 minutes for them to sell everything to get back to the gameplay. It really hurts the viewer experience. I would like an audio slider to adjust some specific sounds. I've had to turn the game sound down a bit lower than usual because of lightning and how loud it is, and I really wish I could have my game sound louder to hear, you know, other things that are very important. But the lightning is legitimately just so loud that it's very tough to deal with. I think like a volume slider for a few specific effects would just go a long way in terms of accessibility. You can, you know, have a slider for brightness already. I can't imagine audio would be much more game-breaking than being able to max out your brightness. I would like it if the overtime bonus you would get would be shown before you take off, so you can have that calculation be more easy. Again, not the biggest deal, and you can just figure it out if you know how it works. But that plus ship loot would just be really nice for like the base game thing. I can scan and I can see the amount of loot on the ship, and I can go up to the quota counter and it'll tell me how much I'm getting from overtime. It would just make things a little bit faster. I know you can get those with mods, I use them, but it would be nice to see it. Otherwise, max items on ship is probably the biggest one of these quality of lives. Basically have to play with mods if you're doing a long enough file because you'll just have items get deleted. You really need to see more of them. And then finally, I would like to see some small fix for enemies or hazards camping exits. I really hate that there can be like a turret pointing at fire, where most egregious could be just a bracken sitting at fire and you just die. I think that all of those should be gotten rid of. Maybe even slime as well, camping exits. Like slime could be a little bit further away from the door, but I mean slime's not that big a deal. In general though, all I mean is just a little bit less of camping the exits. Keep a little bit of a safe entrance for if you're trying to get into main or fire. But that's really it. That's my thoughts as someone who's put a few hours in the game on things I want to see some small tweaks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching.